Welcome back to this week's Speaker's Tip. Good to see you again. I'm going to take up a question that I've received about a dozen requests on, and that's how to handle something that completely throws you off your game when you're speaking. And the questions I've received have been in basically two categories. One is you make a mistake and it completely throws you off your thinking, or you get a question from the audience that completely throws you off and you're not sure where to go from there. First of all, I would like to say that I wish there was just one simple fix I had for this. This absolutely deals with being competent, living life, knowing your subject, all these component parts that actually allow you to be there and answer the question. But I want to give you some tips on what to look at, where to focus in your speaking, on how to handle it when you get thrown off your game. Now, first of all, the mistake or the question isn't going to define you as a speaker. The fact that a mistake was made or that there's a question that was asked isn't going to define how your audience feels about you. How you handle the mistake, how you handle the question might define you as the speaker. And if you're able to handle it gracefully, handle it smoothly. So just the fact that you got something that was asked to you that you weren't expecting, you didn't know how to answer, doesn't define you, but how you address that and move the speech back into where it needs to go very well could define the type of speaker you are. A large part of this deals with the fact of whether you're competent at what you're doing. And what I mean by that is, do you know your subject matter? Do you really know the material that you're presenting? Or have you memorized a script and you're trying to get through a memorized presentation? If that's the case, when you get a question that comes in, it totally throws off this whole thing you memorized. It gets tossed out. You're looking at the question, then you can't find where that thought was that just seemed to disappear. So a large part of this has to do with knowing your material and being competent in it. And with that, it's where are you going? In your speech, you're always talking to an endpoint. Do you know that endpoint? And if you know the endpoint, which is the message of your speech, it's the takeaway that you want the audience to get. Keep focused on the takeaway. So if you get something that throws you off, you may not remember what the exact next step is you had planned, but you know where you're going over there. So you start moving in that direction. Whenever this has happened to me, I start moving in that direction and all of a sudden the path starts to reappear that I put together and I start to get my thoughts back because I remembered where I'm going. If you're simply trying to remember the next word, that's where you were going. You don't have the destination in mind. You lose the next word, you can't find it, you're lost at that point. So a big part of making mistakes, handling questions that you didn't expect is knowing the overall path that you're walking and what the destination is. Another part of it is being willing to have a mistake, being willing to have a question you can't answer, and that doesn't throw you off your game. This comes up to a concept that was just a whole other speech, which is, can you accept the mistake? Can you accept the question you couldn't answer or you didn't expect? Or do you reject the mistake? And do you reject the question? Those things in life we reject have a tendency to control us because we're constantly pushing them away. We don't want to experience them. If we accept them, we can experience them and go on. So one of the things I would recommend is maybe even if you needed to have somebody during your speech ask you questions you don't expect when you're practicing it. During your speech, when you're practicing it, have somebody mess up, cause you to make mistakes so you can make mistakes. Okay, fantastic. I'm doing that. Now let's look at some specific points you can take. One is, I said, you got to get some experience. And the best way to get experience is just speak, get the experience, take your lumps like the rest of us had to. So do you know where you're going? Do you know your message? Okay, I'm speaking, you know what my message is. You get a question you did not expect. One of the things to look at, is this an antagonistic question that's trying to prove you wrong? Or it's just simply an inquisitive question that somebody wants more data on what you're talking about. In either case, if it's something you don't feel comfortable taking up right now, you can always defer to talk to them after you talk about that. And it's a very gracious way of handling things. So if somebody asks you a question you didn't expect, practice saying, that's a great question. I'd like to go into detail with you. Unfortunately, I don't have time in this presentation because of the amount of information I need to discuss. Let's meet after the talk and we can discuss that. Same thing on an antagonistic question. Instead of taking up the controversy that they're trying to throw in, saying that's a great point and I want to discuss discuss that more with you. Let's meet after my talk and we can actually go into depth and discuss what we're talking about there. So it's a way to defer that. Another thing is to have 2 or 3, as they call, cards you can play. So let's say you make a mistake. You have a PowerPoint slide that has 3 typos in it, or you have a video you're going to play on PowerPoint and the video doesn't play. You can use some self-deprecating humor. Say something like, well, this is why I don't get $25,000 a speech. So be glad I have these mistakes in here, because as soon as I fix this, I'm going to start getting $25,000 a speech. It just makes you extremely human for your mistakes. Another thing that you can do, which is, I've done this a couple times. I've completely lost track of my speech on stage. And believe it or not, in the Declaration of Human Rights, the Declaration of Independence that was written for the United States, it says that we're entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I could not remember life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness one time in a speech. I was talking to a group of Rotary exchange students, and I stopped in the middle of the speech and I couldn't remember it. And I said, I raised my hand and said, what's that thing that they say in the Declaration of the Declaration of Independence that we're entitled to? And I asked the audience, and somebody said, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I said, yes, exactly, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I just asked the audience what the answer was. Now, that came from a tremendous amount of experience on stage, that I knew that the mistake didn't define me, but how I handled it defined me. And what it actually did, it put me in better communication with the audience, because I said, I just couldn't think of that for a second. And then I went right on talking about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and what that means in life. But I actually allowed the audience to contribute, which did not put me in a superior position to the audience, but put me on their level, which made the communication go actually a lot better. And again, if you get something really strange going that comes in and you don't want to take it up, you go, you know, that's a really good point. That's an entirely different speech or entirely different seminar. And if I get into that, we're going to be here for 3 or 4 hours today. So what I'd like to do is stick with the curriculum I put together, and we can discuss that. I'll talk to you about this after the meeting, and maybe I can do a talk about that component at a later point. The last thing I want to recommend to you is be honest with the audience. That's what happened at that speech. I was honest with the Rotary speech. I was honest with the audience. I said, I can't believe I can't think of this thing. What is it they say in the Declaration of Independence? And somebody said, I said, yeah, thank you. I was completely honest with them. I said, I can't believe I can't think of what this is. I know this like the back of my hand. And I was brutally honest with them. So if your PowerPoint slides screw up, just go, man, this worked great this morning. I have no idea why it's not working now. But let me tell you the point of the video I was going to show you. The video does this, but the message in the video is this. Just go right into it. If somebody asks you a question, you don't know the answer, be honest with them. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to look into it, and I'm glad to do that. So why don't you meet with me afterwards? That way you're not rejecting that individual, which causes them to double down on them wanting to interrupt you. You're willing to talk to them later. You have an agreement to listen to them, just not right now. So be honest with the audience on what's actually taking place, even if you're nervous. Some of the best speeches I've seen, I was like, I'm so nervous speaking to an audience like this. I normally talk to this group of people. I never speak to an audience this large. So please just bear with me while I work through this. I'm sure I'll get comfortable in a minute. Being honest makes you extremely vulnerable and real to that audience, and also brings in a lot of, I would say, admiration or affinity from the audience, because they actually feel that there's somebody who's being themselves, and they know what it's like to stand in front of a group of people and be nervous. So those are a couple of the tips I have, but the biggest thing that's going to allow you to stand in front of an audience, think on your feet, have mistakes, not have it throw you, have questions shot at you, not have them disrupt your pattern of thinking or your presentation, not throw you off your game, is the amount of times you deliver your speech, how familiar you are with the material, and how you can stand up on that stage comfortably and deliver the speech, taking a pause or break whenever you want. They said it has everything to do with your competence as a speaker, which so much of everything I talk about deals with. As you gain your competence, all these little things that bother you now start to fall away as you get more and more speaking under your belt. So I'm hoping these tips are helping you get more speaking under your belt and give you some guideposts as you go down the road of life speaking. I'll see you next week.